That's actually the only room I can say that in, it's true. Now, that last fact, by the way, is true. It was Barclays instead of MSG. But the weird things you do as a planner, I'm sure you all can attest to that. Okay, so today we're going to talk about something a little bit fun. This is a little bit of a misnomer. A lot of people see this and think, yay, we're going to talk about event design. But we're not. When it comes to raw space, there's a lot that goes into that, which is sort of why our company was created, Space in the Raw, which I'll talk a little bit about after. Voila Event Solutions started in 2015, and Voila really was created for people like you in this room. A lot of us planners are trying to do a lot with very little, and we try to appear a lot bigger than we are. So what that means is, a lot of times we take on really big projects, and our clients have no idea that we're not an army of 50, and it's usually us and a personal assistant. So Voila Event Solutions was created for that purpose, really to be an extension to your team, and really give you that personnel and support that you need to execute large events. And we also work with event solutions from a revenue perspective. So if you have an event company and you want to increase your sales or increase your revenue, we give you a couple strategies on how to do that. I'm also an adjunct at NYU, woo, just like Liz, and currently teaching sort of the same things, sales for event professionals, how to start your own event business. And Space in the Raw kind of came as an accident, a happy accident. So my wonderful business partner, PS, made her career out of looking for really cool event space, right? So we're talking not the hotel ballroom, not the sort of well-known event spaces that everyone's been to, but really event spaces that really high net worth Fortune 500 companies, fashion designers were looking for, because they were looking to create something that no one else had seen before. And what comes with design that no one else has seen before? Well, space that no one has seen before. Now, what's complicated with space like that is, in New York City, as you guys know, we're kind of at a shortage now of event space that no one's seen or used before, right? So unless you're going to a photo studio, which kind of been there, done that, people are doing that now, unless you're going to a brand new event space, it's really hard to find space to wow your guests and have them feel like, wow, this really feels exclusive. With the birth of Space in the Raw, what we started to realize was a lot of what Chris Kelly talked about, who came up here from Convene. So it's not just about event space anymore. It's not just about finding that home for your next event. It's really about, how can I do something that my guests or my clients have never seen before? The unique undertaking with raw space means there are a lot of factors that you have to think about that don't really exist in a turnkey venue or event space. Now, what does that mean? There is a scale that we call the raw scale. Now, some of you might think raw means like, who knows Spring Studios? Skylight Clarkson? So those are technically raw spaces, right? But they're actually established event spaces. So what that means is they're turnkey. There's someone there to greet you. There's someone there to help you set up for your event possibly, give you the certificates of insurance requirements so that when you're loading in and out, everyone's covered and they're insured. Raw space, in our case, means real estate property that's on the market for short-term use. Very different. And as a result, there's a set of rules that goes with using real estate property for a purpose it wasn't intended for. Makes sense, right? So this beautiful space, as you can tell, doesn't look so raw. But what it allows our clients to do is customize. That's really the draw of raw space. Raw space allows creative agencies like Facebook, Microsoft, and all the production companies that exist out there to customize the space. With that, you have raw space sitting in meatpacking with a for lease sign in the window, waiting for some sad broker, right, to be able to find a long-term lease for this tenant. Now, one of the things I just read an article about, which is interesting, in 2019, there's gonna be extra tax put on landlords that are basically taking on leases 5 years or longer. So now long leases are considered liabilities. They're considered financial liabilities, because what's happening is you have WeWorks and co-working spaces that are popping up and making longer term leases less attractive. So there's a vacancy of a ton of beautiful space all over Manhattan that now we can start using for event space. Now, this beautiful image on the right was from Refinery 29, and they were able to completely customize this white box space. Doesn't even look the same, right? So raw space is extremely extractive because it allows you to customize. And it's really the anti-venue. There's no preferred vendor list, right? There are rules, but they're few and far between. You get to hang stuff from the ceiling. You get to paint the walls whatever color you want, because at the end of the day, the property is on the market. So long as you don't damage it, so long as you bring it back to its original state, you pretty much can do whatever you want. The second thing in turning raw space into off space is the never seen before thing. Now, this is a hard one again, even with real estate. Yes, there's a laundry list of properties that are on the market, but there's only a few that we call thoughtful inventory, meaning properties that are really event friendly. Sometimes you walk into a space, which we'll talk about capacity later. Sometimes you walk into a space and you're like, yay, it's 15,000 square feet. I can fit 5,000 people in here. Well, that's not true, because technically you need to have the proper permits, and you also need to have the right number of egress points to make sure if there's a fire, everyone can get out. Now, space that no one's ever seen before means we can only take the sexy inventory, the stuff that we think is thoughtful inventory, into our portfolio, because we want to make sure that it's as easily turnkey as possible for our clients. This is one space where we did 3 major events. The first one is a conference for Microsoft. They completely carpeted the floor, and when you walk in, it looked like a conference center. It looked as sexy as can be. And they did all that in a matter of 4 days. And then when they were done, stripped it all out, and it looked exactly like that. The second one is a dinner for Coach. Beautiful amber lighting. You would have thought they might have done something to the floors, maybe painted them. That's actually just the beauty of lighting. They did nothing to the walls. The tables are gorgeous, and they were custom made. But everything else is just the magic of lighting and candles. The third one, same space, cocktail reception for Sports Illustrated. So if you can't see, you've got some sexy model pictures there on the wall. Pretty dope event, but at the end of the day, again, same space, all from the magic of lighting. Didn't paint the walls purple. Next, we have location, location, location. So when dealing with raw space, you're gonna get a lot of calls from pop-up people, right? People who are looking from the retail perspective to do pop-up stores. Google was one of them. They were launching the Google Mini. This guy, he feels really lucky. He got a Google Mini and walked out. And they were giving them out, by the way. They weren't selling them. So this was a promo for Google to launch Google Mini, and they needed a space with heavy foot traffic. So a lot of times when you're in the raw space business, clients will come to you, and one of the, yes, budget is obviously always at the top of the list, but more important, they have specs on where they want to be. So if it's a retail store or a pop-up, they're gonna want a place with heavy foot traffic, Soho, meatpacking. If it's a conference, they're gonna want a space near public transportation, because chances are they have guests coming from out of town. So be very mindful as to where your space is. Next, privacy and discretion. This is one of our favorite spaces on Park Avenue. It's ground floor, a ton of construction, and a ton of people looking into the windows. We did a beautiful fashion show for Hugo Boss. Wouldn't even know you were in New York. All the windows were shut, all the windows were vinyled out, and the space was, it kept its polished concrete look and its raw look, and they just sort of bordered the columns in the space. Super simple, super easy, super quiet and exclusive. Next, we have capacity. Earlier, you heard me talk about getting the right permit. For certain events, the more the merrier. If you're having a nonprofit gala, for example, the more tickets you sell, the more money you're able to raise. So for nonprofits, we have to be mindful that spaces that we recommend to them have to either already have a certificate of occupancy that is high, or we have to apply for what's called a TPA, a temporary permit of assembly. No one's familiar with that, God bless you. It's not a fun process. And it requires a fire marshal, a very scary guy, to come at your event and do a walkthrough to make sure that the floor plans submitted match what's actually happening in the space. You don't want to get in trouble with that. They will shut you down. The last thing you want is have Nelly performing and the fire marshal comes in and just kicks everybody out. Number 6, other basic permits. And by basic, I mean most common. So when you're dealing in raw space, aside from the TPA, you can also find yourself getting what's called an Alt 2, which is when you're building walls that are above a certain foot, I think it's about 10 or 12 feet, you have to get an Alt 2. If you are having a street truck outside or a red carpet, you have to get a street permit in order to block off the sidewalk or block off the street. And finally, open flame. People forget sternos, decorative candles are considered open flame. We don't mean pyrotechnics. We don't mean someone's gonna do a backflip and toss fire. We mean literally just candles on the dinner table, sternos to heat the food. And then last but not least, planning and the pre-negotiation. That is your biggest way to ensure that your event is successful in a raw real estate space. Have a checklist. These are some of the most important things to check for because again, these are not event spaces. These landlords don't speak events. They don't get it. That's why our company exists. So they're not going to know what questions to ask you, and you're not gonna know what questions to ask them to ensure that A, there's enough power in the space. If you're having a fashion show, there's back of house, there are blow dryers going on and curlers and things like that. That takes up a lot of power. The last thing you want is to blow a fuse in the middle of your fashion show. Again, it's not a venue. They're not required to have X amount of power to be able to accommodate your needs. Timing, you want to make sure that you understand, are there OT costs to the building? Is there a porter that needs to come by? Is there a loading dock operator? You want to know what the noise restrictions are. A lot of these properties are in residential neighborhoods, so they don't allow loud music after a certain time. What's the liquor situation? Will they allow you to sell liquor on site? Will they require that you have a liquor license or liquor liability? Cancellation, super important. If you are doing a short-term rental contract, keep in mind, the landlord's end game is a long-term lease. So if that opportunity comes while you're in contract but your event hasn't happened, check that cancellation clause. Because sometimes they try to take a force majeure and translate that into, well, we have a long-term lease, so we can't take your event. Here's your deposit back, have a nice day. They can actually legally get away with that. And last but not least, spatial limitations. So you want to figure out whether or not there are tenants above you, is there a tenant next to you, is there a loading dock behind you, is there an empty lot to the left of you. Really, it's not just the space inside, really get an understanding of what's around you and above you. Is there a basement? Because a lot of times what happens is, which has happened to us unfortunately, a space above us flooded and completely ruined the speaker system and the sprinkler system that was below us, and it was a Target pop-up store. So you definitely want to make sure that you understand your surroundings in raw space. And last but not least, I wanted to leave a little bit of time. I don't even know if I have that time for any questions. Raw space can get tricky. If I don't, it doesn't look like I do. I'm around all day. Raw space can be scary, but I promise you, other than budget, it can be for everyone. It's a matter of how much you want to wow your guests and how creative you want to be. And again, so long as you follow the rules, you have your checklist, and you stay organized, it doesn't have to be as scary as everyone makes it. Those are my handles. Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz. Have a good one, everybody.